FT8 is a weak signal mode, not a low power mode. Hi, I'm Andy, Kilo 5 Papa Oscar, and welcome to Airwaves Amateur Radio. We hear a lot of people talk about FT8, FT4, and the WSJT-X modes in general these days. They're probably some of the most prevalent, if not the most prevalent modes of operation, especially FT8, on the amateur radio airwaves these days. Honestly, that's fine. They're pretty great. No real extra information being conveyed. You know, it's not single sideband or CW or RIDI or something where you have a freer exchange, but for what it is, very effective. But one of the things people commonly think about or talk about when they talk about the WSJT-X modes, I'll just refer to it as FT8 specifically, which is really only one mode, is that it is a low power mode. It's a bit of a misconception. They are weak signal modes in that they work very effectively in challenging signal to noise ratio environments, which is awesome. That's why they make them, that's why they're so popular, that's why they're so effective for logging some of the most challenging DX contexts you may need to make. But they are not low power modes. They benefit from more power just like, well, really any mode might. You never really hear someone say, oh, you're working FT8? Don't use your beam, you'll have too much gain. Of course not. You wouldn't use low power for an Moon-Earth, JT-65 or whatever it may be a contact? Of course not. You need everything you've got to make those sort of contacts happen. So, of course, you don't need high power for FT8, and it is very effective at lower powers because it's a weak signal mode. But it's even more effective at higher powers. A couple of things to think about as you think about going QRO for FT8. 1. Can your system take it? The FT8 and the WSJT-X modes in general, or JT modes perhaps, are higher duty than single sideband or even CW. You have a long, strong transmission, and that makes a lot of wear and tear on the transmitter and all components in your station. So, can your transmitter take it? Can your coaxial connectors take it? Can your coax, your antenna, your balun, if you have one of those, your amplifier, if you're really adding some power? All something to consider. And we've certainly seen some of the side effects of people not being considerate of that, where they have perhaps an amplifier, a transmitter, they gave it the full muster during FT8, and they kind of cooked it. It can happen. It's something to be considerate about, and it's something to be aware of if you're thinking about going higher power, which you should consider. The other thing to consider is ALC. Depending on how you have your transceiver connected to whatever sound source is providing the tones of FT8, typically a computer, you're probably going to have some form of an audio interface, or at least maybe a USB sound card built into your transceiver, as is common on more modern rigs. Some of the ways you might have them connected, especially if you have external sound cards or external rigs or external units that help communicate between a computer and your transceiver, you may have to manually control levels to make sure your rig is not rising in ALC. You want to make sure ALC is basically flat all the time for FT8 and these modes. What you don't want to do if you add power is have a splattery FT8 signal. That's bad for you, and it's bad for everyone around you, since the FT8, FT4, all of these sort of mode signals are jammed into a narrow passband, We want to be respectful of each other and respectful of the frequency we have here. But we also want to make a lot of contacts, and ultimately a big splattery signal from anyone makes it worse for all of us. So manage that ALC, keep it flat. Now, some more modern rigs, such as the Flex here, you don't have to manage the ALC separately in terms of how you're connecting this or in terms of how it would communicate through the DAX panel to the transceiver, so nothing to worry about. But let's say, for example, my FT8X 5000, where I had a micro keyer 3, I did have to manage the TX level on the micro keyer 3 to make sure I wasn't giving it any ALC. Okay, something to think about and something to dispel. Not low power, just weak signal. So hey, if you have the gear, you have the system ready for it, you might be able to QRO a bit and make more contacts. Be a bigger signal on the band, better DX. And if you manage the ALC at the same time, you won't be bothering anybody. Take care, be well, and 73.